The city is under siege, and a terrifying ultimatum has just been declared. An armored figure emerges, radiating pure menace in the middle of the urban streets. The armored figure demands total submission, forcing the city to its knees in worship. Desperate police officers open fire, hoping to stop the nightmare before it spreads further. But wait, the bullets are literally bouncing off the armored figure's suit like harmless pebbles. The armored figure advances, completely unfazed by the hail of gunfire raining down upon him. He mocks the police officers, laughing at their pathetic attempt to challenge his absolute power. He asks if they really thought bullets could pierce his suit, then raises his palm. A blinding energy beam erupts from his hand, striking the blonde victim with devastating force. The blonde victim collapses, left broken and incapacitated as flames consume the surrounding area. The blonde victim reaches out, desperate to grab the discarded weapon from the ground. But a pair of sleek white boots steps firmly onto the pavement, blocking his path. He looks up, eyes widening in shock as he realizes who has finally arrived. It's Star Sonic, standing tall in his aerodynamic suit, ready to face the armored menace. The armored figure sneers, unimpressed by the legendary hero appearing on the battlefield. Star Sonic doesn't hesitate, leveling his weapon at the villain amidst the raging city fires. The armored figure laughs, mocking the hero for thinking a simple gun could ever stop him. Star Sonic pulls the trigger, unleashing a high-intensity energy projectile straight at his target. The blast connects with incredible force, slamming into the armored figure's chest with blinding light. The helmet shatters into pieces, finally exposing the man beneath the dark, broken armor. The armored figure is reeling, his once impenetrable mask shattered into jagged, useless shards. But he isn't finished yet, sneering as he prepares to strike back at the hero. With a blur of motion, he lunges forward, desperate to regain his lost momentum. He strikes hard, leaving the blonde victim bleeding and broken on the cold asphalt. The armored figure looms over his prey, a towering shadow of pure, unadulterated malice. Police surround the scene, weapons drawn, but they are far too late to intervene now. Star Sonic turns to the blonde victim, offering a moment of unexpected quiet grace. He hands over a firearm, a final lifeline for the victim to survive this hell. Star Sonic vows to return, his silhouette glowing with an intense, otherworldly energy. Then he launches into the sky, slamming into the ground with enough force to level everything. A hand taps a tablet screen, displaying the legendary hero Star Sonic in action. The Guardian reminds Lee Roun that his flight is departing soon, urgency in the air. She checks his documents, ensuring the passport and itinerary are ready for the upcoming trip. Lee Roun sighs, frustrated that his passport photo remains outdated despite his previous requests. The Guardian explains the rush, but Lee Roun eventually shrugs it off, letting it slide. She informs him that a guide will meet him at the airport for the manga fair. Lee Roun bristles, insisting he can handle the journey perfectly fine on his own. The Guardian remains firm, her expression serious as she insists on his safety and comfort. Lee Roun questions if his leg injury is the real reason for the extra supervision. She gently corrects him, clarifying that his status as a minor is the primary concern. The Guardian looms over Lee Roun, finally calling him by his name to depart. A flight attendant bows low, offering professional assistance to help Lee Roun board the plane. The attendant guides Lee Roun forward, while the Guardian watches closely from just behind him. The plane takes off, soaring high above the glowing sprawl of the city lights below. Lee Roun sits in the cabin, his tablet open as he prepares for the long flight. He reads the news about the upcoming manga fair and the famous hero Star Sonic. Star Sonic is plastered everywhere, but Lee Roun knows the truth, he's just a paid actor. Despite his cynicism, Lee Roun can't help but feel a genuine spark of excitement inside. Suddenly, an overweight passenger stumbles, slamming into Lee Roun's seat with a jarring, loud thud. Disaster strikes, Lee Roun's glasses are knocked to the floor, leaving him stunned and completely blind. The overweight passenger stumbles, apologizing for the darkness while Lee Roun desperately searches for his glasses. Relief hits as he spots them, but the situation feels incredibly tense and uncomfortable. Lee Roun stares back, his senses sharp. The man absolutely reeks of strong alcohol. The man keeps stammering apologies, blaming his terrible eyesight for the clumsy, jarring collision. He notices Lee Roun's features, asking if he's a Korean high school student in the dark. Lee Roun remains silent, his expression unreadable as he turns away from the man's intrusive questions. The man looks panicked, sweating profusely as he realizes his presence is causing a scene. An aggressive passenger snaps, shouting for silence because everyone is trying to get some sleep. The flight attendant intervenes, questioning why the man is wandering the cabin instead of the restroom. She finally leads the man away, leaving Lee Roun alone in the quiet, uneasy cabin. Lee Roun stares out the window, counting down the long 8 hours remaining in his flight. He closes his eyes, deciding that catching some sleep is the best way to pass the time. But wait, a sudden violent explosion rips through the cabin, shattering the peaceful silence into pure chaos. Lee Roun's eyes snap open in terror, his face pale as the reality of the disaster hits. Total pandemonium erupts as passengers scream, desperately scrambling to escape the spreading, hungry flames. His expression twists into a mask of pure agony as the heat intensifies around him. The cabin is engulfed in a roaring inferno, turning the flight into a living nightmare. Fire consumes everything in sight, leaving no room for escape as the plane begins to fail. Unidentified airline crew members rush toward the danger, their faces twisted in shock and desperate urgency. Panic-stricken passengers scream in horror, realizing too late that their journey has turned into a tragedy. The Guardian bursts into the room, her face etched with pure frantic desperation. Lee Roun stares back, dazed and confused, struggling to process the sudden, loud intrusion. He bolts upright, screaming in terror as the traumatic memories of the crash flood back. The Guardian rushes to his side, pulling him into a tight, protective, and desperate embrace. She holds him close, whispering prayers of relief that he finally opened his eyes again. Outside, the night sky looms over the private residence, silent and heavy with hidden secrets. Lee Roun sits isolated in his wheelchair, staring blankly into the cold, dark glass window. The Guardian enters the room, carefully balancing a tray with his daily dose of medication. She places the tray down, the clatter of glass echoing through the sterile, quiet room. She asks if he's still unable to sleep, but Lee Roun remains hauntingly, completely silent. The Guardian smiles, relieved that Lee Roun is finally awake and seemingly okay. She marvels at his survival, convinced his parents are watching over him from above. Lee Roun remains distant, his voice barely a whisper as he addresses her as Mr. Moon. He cuts her off, his eyes heavy with exhaustion as he admits he is just tired. The Guardian nods, offering a quiet understanding as she watches him sitting in his chair. A tablet displays the grim reality, 15 days since the crash with search operations still ongoing. The news report continues, mentioning the desperate hope to find any remaining survivors on the island. Lee Roun shifts in his chair, his hand gripping the controls with sudden, nervous intensity. He knocks over his drink, the glass shatters, spilling water everywhere in a moment of panic. His eyes go wide, face drenched and contorted in shock as the memory hits him hard. The glass slips from his grip, shattering as water splashes everywhere in a sudden shock. Lee Roun stares in disbelief, his eyes wide as he processes the strange, sudden movement. He looks at his own legs, abandoned and motionless near the empty, silent electric wheelchair. But then his feet touch the floor and he stands up, his movements fluid and completely natural. He lunges forward, abandoning the chair entirely as a surge of raw, newfound energy takes over. He sprints across the track, his speed blurring the world around him into a dark haze. He plants his foot, kicking off the ground with enough force to shatter the solid pavement. His heart races as he realizes the impossible. He is actually running faster than ever before. He pushes off again, his body moving with supernatural grace, leaving a trail of dust behind. He slides across the surface, his eyes locked forward, completely transformed by this sudden, terrifying power. Lee Roun defies gravity, launching himself into the night sky with a massive, glowing shockwave. He hangs suspended in the air, looking down in absolute confusion at the school below. His eyes widen in pure terror. What is happening to his body and why is this happening? Gravity suddenly fails him and he plummets toward the ground, arms flailing in a panicked freefall. He hits the track with a thunderous impact, glowing energy crackling around his limbs like electricity. He lands in a crouch, the sheer force of his arrival tearing up the synthetic track surface. He skids across the lane, his body sliding with unnatural momentum as he struggles to stop. Back in the classroom, his classmates whisper, their eyes locked on him with growing, suspicious dread. They murmur about the plane crash, questioning how he could possibly be sitting there so calmly. Lee Roun stares ahead, silent and cold, while the class wonders if he's even human anymore. Lee Roun stares blankly, questioning if his miraculous recovery was just a fever dream. He looks down at his motionless legs, trapped once again in his electric wheelchair. The bully approaches, his presence looming over Lee Roun like a dark, suffocating cloud. The bully sneers, mocking Lee Roun for somehow surviving the horrific plane crash. He leans in close, his voice dripping with cruel curiosity about Lee Roun's survival. The bully taunts him, asking if he was bored while Lee Roun was away. Lee Roun reaches into his pocket, his hand trembling as he prepares to pay up. He tosses the Korean currency onto the desk, the cash landing with a pathetic thud. The bully laughs, demanding the usual payment, while the rest of the class watches silently. Without warning, the bully lashes out, his hand slamming into Lee Roun's face with violence. The bully looms over Lee Roun, his face twisted in pure, unadulterated malice. He mocks the survivor, sneering at his 3-week absence from their twisted classroom hierarchy. He grabs Lee Roun's face, his grip tightening as he demands more than just pocket change. Suddenly, a blur of motion, a swift, precise strike connects with the bully's face. The bully staggers back, shock and rage flashing across his face as he shouts out. Dan Hui stands firm, her eyes burning with intensity as she demands the stolen money back. Lee Roon watches, stunned, as Dan Hui steps into the fray to challenge the classroom tyrant. The bully lunges, his fist cocked back, ready to unleash his fury on the girl. Dan Hui doesn't flinch, effortlessly dodging his wild swing with calm, calculated precision. She counters instantly, slamming the bully into the lockers as the stolen cash rains down. Dan Hui pins the bully down, warning him that she won't hold back next time. The bully looks absolutely terrified, sweat dripping as he realizes he's completely outmatched here. Dan Hui stands over him, frustrated, while Lee Roon watches from his wheelchair in silence. She demands to know why he keeps paying the bullies, clearly fed up with his passivity. Lee Roon remains stoic, his expression unreadable as he processes her intense, aggressive intervention. She confronts him about the weekly payments, unable to believe he's been submitting this long. Dan Hui questions his mindset, wondering if all rich kids are this spineless and easily manipulated. Lee Roon shrugs it off, claiming it's just a small price to keep them away. Suddenly, a violent strike hits the air, narrowly missing Lee Roon as the tension spikes. Dan Hui's eyes turn cold, commanding him to never pay them again, no matter what happens. Lee Roon shuts her down coldly, insisting that his business is none of her concern. Dan Hui snaps, frustrated by his attitude after 10 years of friendship, and gives him a shove. An unnamed schoolgirl interrupts, shouting that the PE teacher is looking for Dan Hui right now. Dan Hui reluctantly agrees to leave, demanding that Lee Roon wait for her after class ends. The school day finally wraps up, and the campus clears out as students head home. Dan Hui arrives at the classroom, calling out for Lee Roon to start their walk home. She steps inside, but the room is completely empty. Roon is nowhere to be found. Frustration mounts as she mutters to herself, wondering why he couldn't just stay put. She checks his phone, only to find a cruel, mocking photo sent from his account. Her expression darkens with pure rage as she realizes exactly who is behind this harassment. The bullies corner Lee Roon, mocking his obsession with star Sonic photos. They scroll through his phone, sneering at his lack of any normal social life. The lead bully taunts him, asking if he has any photos of girls at all. He finds a picture of Dan Hui, immediately using it to humiliate and provoke him. Lee Roon snaps, screaming for them to give his phone back right now. The bully grins, clearly enjoying how easily he can make Roon lose his cool. He drops the phone to the ground, forcing Roon to reach for it. The bullies laugh at his pathetic state, calling him a creep with a nasty personality. One bully orders his friend to give Roon a hand with his reach. A brutal kick slams into the wheelchair, sending Roon spiraling into the dirt. The bullies cackle, mocking Lee Roon as he lies helpless on the cold, hard ground. The bully's older brother steps into the light, his presence radiating a dangerous, predatory aura. Dan Hui rushes in, her eyes wide with shock at the sight of her friend being tormented. She screams for them to stop, her voice echoing with desperate, righteous fury against the thugs. The bully points, identifying Dan Hui as the girl who dared to humiliate his younger brother earlier. The older brother looms over her, his cold gaze demanding an answer for her past interference. Dan Hui stands her ground, firing back that his brother only has himself to blame for everything. She turns to leave, trying to pull Lee Roon away from this toxic, dangerous situation immediately. But the older brother snaps, his hand lashing out to grab Dan Hui's hair with brutal force. She hits the pavement hard, the sudden, violent assault leaving her broken and completely defenseless now. The bully's older brother sneers, his eyes cold as he challenges Dan Hui to fight back. Dan Hui, battered and desperate, glares up at him, refusing to let his threats break her spirit. She lunges forward, a desperate, final attempt to strike back at the monster tormenting them both. But he's too fast, he intercepts her strike, his hand crushing her momentum with terrifying, effortless ease. He mocks her pathetic effort, laughing as he lands a brutal, bone-jarring blow to her face. She collapses, coughing and broken, while he stands over her, radiating pure, unadulterated, sadistic malice. He kicks her while she's down, demanding more resistance just to satisfy his own twisted ego. Lee Roon watches in absolute horror, his voice cracking as he begs them to stop the violence. The older brother ignores him, coldly ordering his accomplice to strip Dan Hui while she lies helpless. He looms over her, his hands reaching out to finish his cruel, humiliating work once and for all. Lee Roon is done begging, his expression shifts into something cold and terrifying. He snaps, his eyes glowing with raw, latent power that defies all logic. Blue energy crackles around his feet, grounding him with an unnatural, heavy intensity. The bullies freeze, their faces draining of color as they witness the impossible happening. Lee Roon stands tall, his posture perfect. The wheelchair is a distant, forgotten memory now. The bully's older brother stammers, his confidence shattering as he stares at Roon's legs. Roon's gaze locks onto his target, his eyes burning with a silent, lethal promise. He launches forward, a blur of motion that leaves the ground trembling beneath him. With a thunderous impact, he slams into the enemy, shattering the concrete upon contact. The older brother recoils, reeling from the sudden, overwhelming force of Roun's brutal counterattack. Blue electricity surges around his feet, crackling with an intense, otherworldly energy. He leaps into the air, moving with a speed that defies all human capability. The older brother's face twists in pure, unadulterated shock as he realizes his mistake. Roun descends like a thunderbolt, his body a weapon aimed directly at his target. The impact is brutal, leaving the bullies screaming in terror as they scramble away. They stare in disbelief, paralyzed by the sight of the boy they once easily bullied. He stands before them, a shadow of pure intimidation, his presence completely overwhelming. Roun stares them down, his voice cold as he labels them nothing but trash. The bullies are frozen, caught in a nightmare they never expected to face tonight. A final, agonized scream pierces the night air as Roun unleashes his true, hidden power. Danhui stares blankly, her head bandaged, finally regaining consciousness in the hospital bed. Li Roun sits by her side, his expression shifting from shock to genuine relief. She jolts up, panic flaring as she realizes where she is and what happened. Danhui frantically questions how she arrived here and what became of those brutal attackers. Li Roun stays calm, lying through his teeth about a mysterious tall guy intervening. Danhui lets out a massive sigh of relief, clearly grateful that the nightmare is over. She tries to brush off her injuries, but her wincing face tells a different story. Li Roun shuts her down, reminding her that her ribs are still dangerously cracked. She ignores his warning, throwing a wild punch to prove she is perfectly fine. Suddenly, the unnamed nurse enters the room, catching Danhui in the middle of her outburst. Li Roun announces he's leaving, while the nurse tends to a recovering Danhui. He turns his back on the hospital room, his mind already set on unfinished business. He stares at his own reflection in the glass, a ghostly, immobile figure in a chair. He sits in the darkness, focusing every ounce of his willpower on his unresponsive legs. A sudden spark, his big toe twitches against the footrest, defying the paralysis. He gasps, eyes wide, pouring his entire soul into the desperate command to move. The intensity builds, his face dripping with sweat as he begs his body for cooperation. Blue electrical energy begins to hum, crackling violently around his feet on the footrest. The air vibrates with power as he surges upward, the energy manifesting in brilliant light. He stands tall, trembling in disbelief. The impossible has happened and he is finally walking again. Li Roun stands before the mirror, stunned by the blue electrical discharge around his feet. He stares at his reflection, eyes wide. Does this mean he can control this power at will? He decides to test his limits, his gaze sharpening with a sudden, intense, newfound resolve. He leaps from the rooftop, soaring through the night air with effortless, superhuman grace and speed. He lands on a lower building, his heart racing as he realizes the sheer scale of this. He looks back at the massive distance he just covered, his expression one of pure, raw disbelief. He catches his breath, realizing that pushing his limits this far might be a dangerous stretch. He stares up at the towering skyline, knowing he needs serious training to master this gift. He plants his foot firmly, the ground vibrating as he prepares to unleash his speed again. He explodes forward, a blur of motion tearing across the track with blinding, electric intensity. Li Roun freezes, his breath hitching as he tests his newfound, terrifying agility. He vaults over the ledge, his body moving with a speed that defies physics. He launches himself into the dark sky, leaving the rooftop far behind him. Gravity holds no sway as he soars toward the moon, a silhouette of power. He lands with a surge of blue electricity, tearing through the solid stone surface. He stands amidst the city lights, the urban sprawl stretching out beneath his feet. His eyes widen in shock, the adrenaline is finally starting to hit him hard. He leaps again, a streak of light cutting through the silent midnight air. He slams into the ground, sparks flying as he barely manages to control his momentum. He gasps, clutching the ground. He actually did it, he's finally free of the chair. Li Roun celebrates his newfound control, finally mastering his incredible, latent electrical powers. But his joy vanishes, a massive dark plume of smoke rises from the city skyline. A structural inferno erupts, the flames roaring with a terrifying, uncontrollable intensity. Li Roun stares at the chaos, his expression shifting from triumph to immediate, cold dread. Unidentified firefighters scramble to the scene, shouting desperate commands to contain the spreading fire. The crew believes everyone is safe, until Li Roun interrupts with a frantic, urgent warning. He screams that his friend is still trapped inside the burning, collapsing building. The lead firefighter bellows for the ladder, realizing there is no time left to waste. The firefighters hesitate, staring at the wall of fire, paralyzed by the sheer lethal danger. But then, a massive surge of energy blasts through the inferno, clearing a path forward. Li Roun's hand hits the floor, crackling with raw, surging electrical energy. He spots Danhui trapped under the debris, the fire closing in fast. He reaches her, scooping her up in his arms with desperate, focused intensity. His eyes glow with a piercing, electric blue light. He's fully tapped into his power. Blue sparks dance around his legs, preparing him for a massive, high-speed escape. He moves with blinding speed, a human blur cutting through the thick, suffocating smoke. A massive shockwave of energy spirals outward, shielding them from the collapsing, burning structure. He blasts out of the inferno, landing hard in front of the stunned, watching crowd. The unnamed firefighters watch in absolute shock as he touches down, safe and sound. He gently sets Dan Hui down, his secret finally exposed to the world in this moment. The firefighter stammers, completely stunned by the mysterious figure standing before him. Lee Ro-eun pulls his hood low, his eyes darting away to avoid further scrutiny. He leaps, vanishing into the night sky with a surge of crackling electric power. The crowd gasps, their phones raised high to capture the impossible glowing silhouette above. Everyone is mesmerized, whispering in disbelief at the superhuman display unfolding right before them. Back in the shadows, Lee Ro-eun steps out of his shoes, his feet finally touching ground. He collapses onto the bed, his chest heaving as the adrenaline begins to slowly fade. He stares at the ceiling, his heart pounding, still reeling from the night's chaotic events. The next day, he sits in his wheelchair, acting as if nothing ever changed. Nearby, students gossip about Sungju, completely oblivious to the real hero sitting right behind them. Lee Ro-eun sits in his wheelchair, hearing whispers about a classmate hospitalized after a beating. The bullies laugh, mocking the victim and calling him weak, completely oblivious to the truth. Ro-eun keeps his head down, maintaining his cover while the class continues their cruel chatter. A bully pulls out his phone, eager to show off the viral Hanamdong fire footage. Ro-eun's eyes widen, he knows exactly what that video contains and his heart begins to race. A cold sweat breaks out as he realizes the footage might expose his secret identity. The teacher demands phones away, but the damage is already done. The video is spreading. Ro-eun stares at the screen, seeing the blurry, incriminating footage of the fire rescue scene. His pulse thunders in his ears, the reality of his exposure hitting him like a truck. The screen shows the crowd and the firefighters, confirming his heroic intervention is now public. The internet is ablaze, with skeptics calling the viral fire rescue footage pure CG. Others are fighting back, sharing links to interview videos to prove the event was real. A witness on the news confirms it was a person, not a machine, flying away. The reporter details how the mystery savior is now the center of intense public speculation. Online forums are flooded with questions, debating if the footage is staged or truly authentic. Lee Ro-eun stares at the screen, his eyes wide as he realizes his secret is slipping. The comments section takes a wild turn, theorizing that the hero is a real-life star. The name Star Sonic begins to trend, with everyone convinced he is the masked savior. Lee Ro-eun freezes in his chair, paralyzed by the irony of the public's false conclusion. He grips his tablet, trembling as he watches the world credit the wrong man entirely. Guardian checks on Lee Ro-eun, offering to bring his meal directly to his room. Lee Ro-eun declines, smiling as he insists on coming down to eat with her instead. Guardian acknowledges his request with a simple, calm nod, accepting his decision without any fuss. Lee Ro-eun rolls his electric wheelchair down the hallway, the mechanical whirring echoing through the house. A mysterious, armored figure stands in his path, radiating an intense and intimidating presence. Lee Ro-eun looks up, his expression shifting into a calm, knowing smile as they meet. The real man show host screams into his camera, hyping up the viral rescue footage. He insists that a real-life Star Sonic has finally appeared, fueling the public's wild speculation. The host promises his viewers an exclusive investigation to uncover the truth behind the incident. He begs his audience to subscribe and hit notifications, desperate to capitalize on the viral fame. Lee Ro-eun sits in his room, surrounded by floating objects, his focus entirely on the screen. A car drives down the street, the occupants chatting about schoolwork and daily life in Hanamdong. Dan Hui, looking tired, tells the driver she isn't feeling well and wants to skip the academy. The female driver dismisses her concerns, accusing the young student of just trying to slack off. Suddenly, the road beneath the white car violently fractures, the pavement crumbling into a massive void. The vehicle loses all traction as the asphalt beneath its tires completely disintegrates into the abyss. The driver screams in pure terror, gripping the wheel as the world literally swallows them whole. The car plunges into the dark, gaping sinkhole, disappearing from the surface in a heartbeat. Debris rains down into the deep, echoing darkness as the road continues to collapse inward. The car sits trapped at the bottom of the massive, silent, and terrifying urban sinkhole. Students flood out of the school gates, completely unaware of the looming disaster nearby. A girl complains loudly about her difficult mock exam, oblivious to the world around her. A classmate snaps back, mocking her academic struggles with a sharp, biting remark. She fires back annoyed, while Lee Ro-eun sits silently in his electric wheelchair nearby. Suddenly, the students stop, their attention glued to a smartphone screen in disbelief. A massive sinkhole has just torn through the road in Sinodong, causing absolute chaos. Lee Ro-eun stares in shock. That location is dangerously close to their current position. The news hits the phone screen, showing the gaping, terrifying void in the asphalt. Panic spreads as they realize a car has plummeted into the dark, crumbling abyss. Lee Ro-eun turns his wheelchair away, his expression hardening as he prepares to act. Dan-hui stares at her phone, frustrated by Ro-eun's cold and distant behavior. Lee Ro-eun moves with supernatural speed, his hooded figure blurring through the narrow alleyway. He stops, his mind racing as he processes the dire situation unfolding in Sinodong. He knows the danger is imminent, he has to reach the disaster site immediately. He sheds his disguise, preparing to unleash his full power to save those trapped. He pulls his mask tight, his eyes hardening with a lethal, focused intensity. With a single, explosive leap, he launches himself high above the city rooftops. Below, the Sinodong sinkhole has turned into a chaotic, cordoned-off nightmare for everyone. A reporter broadcasts live, detailing the desperate, failing rescue mission at the massive crater. Unnamed emergency responders struggle against unstable ground, their rescue efforts hitting a deadly wall. The rescue team is paralyzed by the unstable ground, unable to reach the trapped victims. Tensions boil over as the responders realize the helicopter support is still too far away. Inside the crushed vehicle, Ki-yoon is sobbing, terrified that this is the end for them. Ki-yoon breaks down, blaming herself for the situation, convinced she's being punished for her behavior. Her mother tries to stay strong, desperately reassuring her that help is coming any second now. A hooded figure appears through the darkness, looming over the wreckage like a silent guardian. The mother spots him, her eyes widening with a sudden, desperate spark of hope for rescue. Lee Ro-eun instructs her to stay calm as he prepares to extract the child from danger. The mother urges Ki-yoon to go with him, promising she will follow right behind them. Lee Ro-eun leaps into action, his superhuman speed carrying Ki-yoon away from the gaping abyss. Lee Ro-eun drops to the ground, urgently shouting for the medics to take over. Little Ki-yoon is hysterical, sobbing and screaming for her mother to be saved next. Ro-eun turns back toward the abyss, his expression hidden behind the mask as he acts. A responder tries to block him, warning that the unstable ground is far too dangerous. Ro-eun ignores the warning, staring down into the shifting, crumbling darkness of the sinkhole. His eyes are sharp and focused, blood splatters marking the intensity of the situation. He doesn't hesitate, diving headfirst into the deep, terrifying void to reach the wreckage. He descends with calculated precision, his body moving like a shadow against the dark walls. Ro-eun reaches out, his hand extended toward the trapped car deep in the crater. The crowd watches in stunned silence, their phones raised as they witness the impossible rescue. The crowd gasps in total disbelief, their eyes locked onto the impossible scene above. Lee Ro-eun soars through the sky, carrying the rescued victim to safety with ease. He lands gracefully, the dust settling around him as the crowd watches in stunned silence. Little Ki-yoon cries out for her mother, her voice trembling with raw, overwhelming relief. Mother and daughter collide in a desperate, tearful embrace, finally reunited after the terrifying ordeal. The mother clings to her child, whispering frantic words of gratitude to their mysterious savior. Lee Ro-eun stands silently, his hooded gaze fixed on the ground, avoiding the sudden spotlight. But the onlookers aren't letting him leave. They swarm him, demanding answers to their questions. An aggressive reporter shoves a microphone in his face, desperate for a Hanamdong connection. Phones flash everywhere, capturing the hero as the crowd ignores all warnings to stay back. Blue energy crackles beneath his feet, the raw power humming with an intense electric vibration. He launches into the air, a hooded blur of speed defying the laws of physics. He descends like a meteor, his impact shattering the ground and sending shockwaves through the city. His eyes widen behind the mask, the sheer adrenaline of this power is becoming hard to contain. The Real Man Show TV logo flashes, signaling the start of a viral, high-stakes broadcast. The host screams in excitement, claiming the legendary star Sonic has saved the world once again. He lists the disasters, from the Hanamdong fire to the massive sinkhole, tracking the hero's path. The host highlights the Nakyeondong collapse, noting the hero's rescue count has already exceeded 10. International viewers are obsessed, swarming the scene and turning this into a global media frenzy. The host fixates on the blue teardrop mask, desperate to claim credit for the hero's name. The Real Man Show TV host screams, convinced Star Sonic is watching his broadcast live. Lee Ro-eun watches the screen, his expression unreadable as the host begs for a cameo. Ro-eun pauses, wondering if wearing that mask was a bit too much for his public image. The host pivots, shifting the broadcast to the infuriating case of the driver, Ju Th-wan. Ju Th-wan smirks behind sunglasses, offering a fake apology while the media swarms him for answers. The host zooms in on Ju Th-wan's smug face, questioning if this is true remorse. Public outrage explodes in the chat, claiming the legal system was bought off by money. Ro-eun stares at the screen, his anger boiling over as he considers hunting the criminal down. The chat demands Star Sonic intervene, pushing Ro-eun to finally take justice into his own hands. Raoun's resolve hardens. He decides to act faster than the law, embracing his role as Star Sonic. Lee Raoun watches the screen, his expression hardening as he reads the public's desperate plea. The nightclub pulses with neon lights and loud music, masking the rot hidden deep inside. Ju Thwan lounges in a booth, surrounded by luxury, mocking the very idea of true justice. His friends laugh, betting on his untouchable status, while he revels in his latest legal escape. Ju Thwan smirks, admitting he faked a mental illness to dodge the consequences of his crimes. He raises his glass, his eyes cold, hinting that alcohol was the least of his vices. The group gasps as he casually mentions using drugs to manipulate his way out of prison. His friends cheer, completely blinded by his wealth and his twisted, arrogant sense of power. Ju Thwan laughs, a sinister grin spreading across his face as he toasts to his corruption. He stumbles into the parking garage, unaware that his luck is about to run out forever. Ju Thwan lounges in the parking garage, his arrogance masking his complete lack of awareness. He glances up, his smug expression freezing as he spots the hooded figure watching him. Ju Thwan demands to know who is lurking in the shadows, his voice dripping with entitlement. Suddenly, a blinding flash of blue energy strikes, slamming into him with overwhelming, raw force. He hits the ground hard, the hooded vigilante standing over him like an executioner. Ju Thwan gasps, clutching his side as the pain from the sudden assault finally registers. The masked figure looms, his presence a chilling, silent threat in the dark, empty space. Ju Thwan scrambles back, screaming demands and threats, still convinced his status protects him. He continues to rant, his ego refusing to accept that he is finally facing consequences. He sneers, threatening the vigilante with his power, completely oblivious to his impending, brutal downfall. A sudden, violent strike connects, sending Ju Thwan sprawling across the cold, hard ground. Ju Thwan screams in agony, his arrogance shattered as he realizes his attacker knows everything. Lee Raoun looms over him, his voice cold as he labels the criminal a remorseless monster. Ju Thwan's eyes widen in terror, desperately wondering if this vigilante was hired by his enemies. He scrambles backward, his voice trembling as he tries to bribe his way out of pain. He offers millions, his greed and desperation clashing as he begs for a way to pay. Ju Thwan tries to feign a friendly tone, pathetically hoping to talk his way out of this. But Lee Raoun isn't listening. He delivers another crushing blow, silencing the pathetic, desperate plea. The criminal howls in pain, his body buckling under the relentless, overwhelming force of the vigilante. Lee Raoun demands a public confession and a sincere apology to the victims, right now. Ju Thwan is broken, sobbing, and desperate, finally agreeing to give the public confession. Lee Raoun stands over him, cold and detached, warning that next time he'll take more. The vigilante turns away, leaving the pathetic criminal trembling alone on the dark rooftop floor. Ju Thwan stares blankly, his arrogance completely shattered by the brutal reality of his situation. Meanwhile, at school, students are obsessed, whispering about the mysterious Star Sonic everywhere they go. Even the actor James Kim is publicly begging for a chance to meet the real hero. A student mocks Raoun for his lack of excitement, completely unaware of who sits before him. The classmate presses on, wondering why Raoun isn't acting like a total fanboy for Star Sonic. She drops the bombshell. Rumors claim the vigilante might actually be a student at their school. She laughs, pointing out the uniform pants in the footage, never suspecting the truth is right there. Lee Raoun chuckles, his expression chillingly calm as he dismisses the schoolyard gossip. Dan Hui stares at him, her silence heavy with growing, gnawing suspicion about his true nature. She confronts him directly, noting his strange, newfound brightness. Something just doesn't add up here. Meanwhile, at Weary University Hospital, the atmosphere is thick with cold, calculated, and vengeful intent. An assistant stands nervously, suggesting police involvement, but the air in the room turns icy. Ju Thwan snaps, his face bandaged and twisted with pure, unadulterated rage at his attacker. He orders his assistant to leave, his patience for legal formalities completely and utterly gone. Ju Thwan seethes, his mind fixated on the vigilante who dared to humiliate him so brutally. A mysterious figure enters, looming over the bed with a dark, predatory promise of retribution. The stranger mocks Ju Thwan, questioning if he's truly capable of handling such a dangerous opponent. Ju Thwan recoils in his hospital bed, terrified by the sudden, uninvited visitor. The intruder smiles, his eyes glowing with a cold, electric blue intensity. Ju Thwan stammers in shock, realizing his worst nightmare has just walked through the door. The vigilante moves closer, his presence suffocating as he looms over the cowering criminal. Ju Thwan tries to scream, but the vigilante silences him with a sharp, warning glare. The air crackles with static as the vigilante prepares to deliver his final, chilling message. The vigilante's eyes burn with power, signaling that his patience has finally run out. Outside, the Wuri University Hospital stands silent, unaware of the confrontation happening within its walls. An unnamed nurse enters the room, completely oblivious to the dangerous tension filling the space. She approaches Ju Thuan with a syringe, unaware that she has just walked into danger. A pair of eyes widen in sudden, sharp realization something has gone terribly wrong. The hospital bed sits empty, its frame twisted and broken, abandoned in the sterile room. A syringe lies discarded on the floor, the needle bent from a sudden, violent impact. Ju Thuan is gone, his bed frame mangled into a grotesque, unrecognizable metal sculpture. He is curled up in the corner, trembling, his body contorted in a state of pure terror. Investigators swarm the scene, their cameras flashing as they document the impossible, wreckage-filled room. They snap photos of the carnage, their expressions grim as they survey the inexplicable destruction. One agent stares at the twisted metal, questioning how a human could cause such damage. A group of men in suits steps forward, their presence cutting through the chaotic tension. The Special Investigation Headquarters has arrived, officially seizing the case with a cold, calculated smile. The confusion is palpable. The police have never even heard of this mysterious Special Investigation Headquarters. The agent offers his credentials, his smile cold and professional as he shuts down the inquiry. The officer is forced to back down, his expression shifting to one of uneasy, forced compliance. A phone call changes everything. The pressure from the top is coming down hard and fast. The order is absolute. The commissioner demands they drop the case and back off immediately. The captain is stunned, his face pale as he realizes the investigation is officially dead. The agent offers a chilling, polite thank you, clearly satisfied with their total, forced cooperation. The officers are left reeling, questioning the identity of these men who just hijacked their case. The team is already packing up, leaving the scene before any real answers can be uncovered. The trail is going cold, and the questions about the investigation are being swept under the rug. Lee Roun tracks Ju Thuan's movements, finding him at Club Gold before the hospitalization. The police captain and his team discuss the suspect's shady behavior, feeling completely frustrated. They demand to know the exact location of the club to continue their investigation. The investigation leads them straight to the entrance of the notorious Club Gold. They reach the security room, only to find a massive, suspicious gap in the data. The technician confirms the worst, the parking lot footage from the critical time is gone. The team questions if this was a deliberate cover-up, but the tech remains unsure. He claims the old camera just glitches, but the timing feels way too convenient. Suddenly, Ju Thuan's assistant steps in, coldly ordering the police to leave the premises immediately. The captain stares in silence, realizing they are being stonewalled by powerful hidden forces. Roun rubs his head, feeling a deep, unsettling intuition that something is terribly wrong. The news reports confirm Ju Thuan is dead, leaving the public in a state of shock. A student stares at his phone, his jaw dropping as the notification of the death hits. The classroom erupts into chaos as everyone realizes the notorious drunk driver has finally met his end. Whispers turn to speculation, with students wondering if Star Sonic was truly responsible for this outcome. One student dares to ask if the vigilante is actually hiding among them in the classroom. His classmate scoffs, calling him an idiot and dismissing the wild theory as impossible nonsense. The student doubles down, pointing to the uniform pants in the footage as undeniable, damning evidence. A teacher snaps, barking at the students to stop browsing the internet and focus on assignments. Meanwhile, at Wuri University Hospital, a hooded figure silently infiltrates the building under the cover of night. Lee Roun slips into the hospital room, his eyes scanning the shadows for any movement. Wait, the room is empty, the bed is gone, and he's left completely stunned by the void. He pulls back, his heart racing as he tries to process this impossible, sudden disappearance. Nearby, staff members are whispering, pointing to the spot where the heavy equipment once stood. They discuss the rumors, wondering if the story about the patient's gruesome death is actually true. The conversation turns grim as they confirm the patient was indeed crushed by the hospital bed. A staff member shudders, asking who could possibly be capable of such a twisted, violent act. They decide to leave, disgusted by the dark reality of what has occurred in this room. Roun watches them retreat, his face pale as he realizes he's being drawn into something deeper. He stares at the empty space, questioning how a massive bed could be folded in half. Lee Roun stares into the void, his mind racing. He knows he didn't do this.